How fun is that? Welcome, everyone. Very, very sorry about our dysfunctional metaverse. That did not work well, but because it's the first inaugural meetup that we do tonight, so we already have steep learning curve. So for the next one, we know what not to do. So having said that, welcome to our first opportunity meetup for CleanTech, the Swiss American Chamber of Commerce, Chapter Southern California. Is very delighted to have a very, very large audience. We actually have full house here for the site here, and I also welcome whoever is out there. We have lost track, but welcome to everybody that is out there in the metaverse in our virtual environment. I don't know if the convention center is up or not, but I hope the experience is there. So I make it very quick. I want to say thank you first for USC, the Viterbi School of Engineering, to be the host for us tonight. And I want to also thank you to the whole team already now. I'm going to in the closing remarks go a little bit deeper. So everybody worked very hard to get that up and running today. So having said that, I actually want to just I got a little bit lost of track. The agenda for tonight we're going to keep. So after a couple of introducing words, we're going to have a so-called express incubating panel discussion. So with our keynote speakers, they will all have a couple of minutes on stage. They will talk about the different, let's say, market insights, market drivers, market networks that are essential for people that are somehow related into clean tech. And what does related mean? What we do here with these opportunity meetups, these meetups are prone to actually give people that are not essentially be directly involved in clean tech right now, but give them an idea, kind of insights to strategize how could they potentially capitalize on the growing clean tech market. So you could be a software engineering house, you could be a tax lawyer. The goal for tonight is that you understand what are the opportunities in the clean tech market for your business, for your career, for your personal intentions to be part of it or not. And with the audience that we have, with the panel that we have tonight, you have the perfect sounding board to actually ask questions. How do these opportunities, how do this information that you gather tonight somehow translate into your own business or into your career? So use the time afterwards and approach these people when they're here, or then also a post stage, those folks that are online with your questions, your intentions, your thoughts, and help them you to strategize. Closing here, next I want to actually give to David, our host tonight, to maybe give a couple of words around USC.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
And I need to talk into this so everybody else who hears me right. Yeah, okay.
You always can say, David Tennenhouse, can you hear us?
And
Yes.
Adam nods. Okay, good. Okay. Hi, my name is David Gerber. Very pleased to actually be able to host this event at the Viterbi Startup Garage, which is the space that we're in. The Viterbi Startup Garage is part of the Office of Technology, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship, which is a group of faculty and staff that support our innovation ecosystem with a focus on hard tech and the hard sciences that come out of the Viterbi School of Engineering. My name is David Gerber. I'm really just your host. I'm very pleased to have been invited by Veronica, in fact, to actually also listen and guide the conversation if need be, though I think with your speakers, it won't take a lot. So without further ado, again, thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Arash. And where's Val? Thank you, Val and Bastian. And I'm happy to answer questions about USC afterwards, but let's get rolling into the conversation. Oh, and hi, everybody out there. So, should we get going with the keynote speaker?
Yeah, you want to say something, Raj?
Sure, yeah. So, thank you. Thank you very much. Arash, I'm part of the board of member board of the SoCal Chapter, and I was in charge of putting this event together with CleanTech. I didn't expect it to become this magnitude. We have a lot of participants and a lot of good keynote speakers at a good point. We got lucky. We had many candidates that we choose for. Best of those candidates, Ardi, Mark, Dave, and Arian, two online, two in person here. And CleanTech was one of the hot topics of the year, I guess, well, I can say that. With the crisis we have in Europe, with energy, with the incentives that California having right now, we know that CleanTech has a good future, right? We know that we need to move from the fossil fuel to new technology, new energy, and we've been one of the spearheading countries in CleanTech. California, the state that has all the good environmental laws, not very friendly, but has been promoting the CleanTech. Help us put this together. So thank you for that, and I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Raj.
Shoot. Okay. Yep. So we are going to get going. We're a little bit late. Okay. So Ardi, you're actually up first. There are no rules other than we have to go at a fast pace. And if there are any lulls in the conversation, I will prod you guys.
Okay, so I'm going to share my slides. Please let me know everyone can see that. And let me minimize that. So hopefully.
Can you guys see them online? Give me a thumbs up. Yep.
Great. Pleasure talking here, and thanks for inviting me. My name is Ardi Arian. I have presenting my own company, Renewable America, and we are basically a startup. But I'm doing what I'm doing here for about the last 15 years, and started back in Germany after I finished my degree as an electrical engineer. So let me jump right into the presentation. So let's talk about the challenge, and I want to start with this question to everyone, and want to kind of give you an idea, just try to imagine that. I don't know if everyone saw that DeLorean from Back to the Future. So just imagine we would have a chance and we could go back and bring those great three inventors from the history and take them to the year of 2022. And I'm talking here about Marconi, who was the inventor of radio, and I'm talking about Graham Bell, who was the inventor of the phone, and Thomas Edison, who invented the first investor-owned utility and basically also the electrical power distribution system. And I want you all to tell me which of them would be most shocked of seeing changes in 2022, right? So, just let's vote. So who would say Marconi? Okay. And then who would think about Graham Bell? And I have difficulty to see the other ones, but I hope everyone else is active here. And so Thomas Edison, who would think about that? Okay. So yeah, I guess that all of them have their own reason to be shocked, right? Okay. So let me take the next slide. So here's what is the challenge right now. So my point is, what Thomas Edison started about 100 years ago has basically not pretty much improved if you compare it with the other technologies. So radio and phone, they're tremendously improved. But unfortunately, our one-way highway of how we deliver electricity is still almost the same how we invented it. So therefore, that are basically the California needs that we have identified. We know that in 2030, we want to be 60% renewable, and the target decarbonization goal is for 2045 to be 100% decarbonized. then what we need to do to get more grid reliability is definitely get more decentralized and also dispatchable clean power. And I guess all of you are aware of public safety power shutoffs and how communities have to recover out of that. So these are the three important challenges that we identified. So let's talk about a possible solution that we think would be worth to talk about today. So when we talk about grid transition, that's what we see. So just what you see there on the left side, that is basically our today's main infrastructure. So we have on the top the transmission grid, and we have on the lower bottom the distribution grid. And mainly generation is happening today on the transmission level. Therefore, we have hundreds of miles need to transform all the generation, and anything in between, anything in between that can happen, an interruption is a big risk for communities, for people to not receive electricity. Therefore, grid transition, the way I would describe it, is more what you see on the right side. We're going to lower, most probably, the transmission generation resources. I don't know if all of you are aware, but you have huge problems with drought seasons of last year, and maybe this year, hopefully not. I'm not want to even bring it in my mind, but I'm saying hydro is a big issue. We also see coal power plants have to shut off. So all of those difficulties, we will go to that point that transmission generation resources are going to be lowered. We need more increased distribution generation resources that can deliver next to load electricity. So that's the concept I'm talking about. And you see a bunch of smaller solar farms, wind farms, but on the distribution. And that's basically the grid transition we're talking about. So here, I'm just comparing what a typical project that today would be starting, let's say a solar energy storage project on the transmission line is more the one you see on the top or the bigger scale. What we can do is much smaller project that we talk about a streamlined process. So there is a huge potential out there that is basically untouched as of today, and we just started with it. And how we do this, I want to get a little bit more into details. So here, you basically see how much the structure can be less impacting on the ground, because one of the biggest concerns is how much are we affecting lands and how much do we create erosion control and stormwater prevention. Then all of those things we can address with simple installations and with simple software. And basically, I want to show what software can do today. This is an idea of one of our projects where we are showing, we look at how the topo of a land looks like, and we can really follow the terrain. We don't need to push anything on the ground. We don't need to do grading operations. So installation can be pretty easy on that list. Now, another thing, many people are talking about, what about farming concerns? So if you take farming away, what's going to happen? Here's what we are showing. There's a pollinator habitat friendly activity that can be proceeding, and not too much water usage, but a little bit will be needed, at least in the first term. And then basically you can create a great habitat for native bees or all kind of other species that could really improve the environment and would not stop farming. So here we also show what a system can look like. That's a picture here, kind of a 3D of a single axis tracker that would follow the sun. So it would start in the morning and it would go all the way up to the west. And so those are today absolutely working well. And those challenges that have been there about 10 years ago are all solved. And we have pretty much confidence in this technology. Also, what you want to think about is using purified silicon modules and not anything that would be toxic or chemical waste. So that we can definitely avoid, and that technology is something that we do. So here we also want to address one of our biggest issues in California is water usage. Everyone is aware about that there is a huge problem about those panels. They're going to create a lot of dust and dirt. So they're going to reduce the efficiency. What we can do is basically there are robots that the robots can go and do dry cleaning, and the dry cleaning would definitely not have water use. And if you do it in the right time and rhythm, it will definitely not decrease the efficiency of those panels. So here's also a little bit more about what really pollination can do. We have those questions. I don't want to go too much in detail. I would make those slides available for everyone who is more interested in understanding how much pollinator-friendly habitats can impact the environment. So basically, another slide that also goes more into detail about pollinator-friendly activity. I know we are rushing time. I'm not going into those details for now. Here I'm showing what our project pipeline looks as of today. So this is about 30 projects that are all over California. This is basically showing the potential of each of those projects are not bigger than 5 megawatts, but overall you can have spread out over the whole state many locations that would create in each of those neighborhoods, let's say maybe in a circle mile of 3, 5, or maximum 10 miles, they can create resilience. And let me talk a little bit more about how I see electric resiliency can look like in the future. So there is something that we talk about is called community microgrid. So a community microgrid is basically shown here. And what I was explaining before, the level between distribution, and if someone is not aware what distribution means, it's those wooden poles that we have outside. The big steel towers, they move for the transmission lines. So on the distribution level, we have the houses, we have businesses, and we can create a community microgrid. That means an area that would receive electricity through an outage. And that technology is available. PG&E is supporting that. Southern California Edison is supporting it. So this is basically a breakthrough, just started last year. And this is one example of a project that is up in winter. And you can see here, I'm going to show it here with my mouse. That's the location that we would install solar and energy storage. With energy storage, you can make that happen. And then you have critical facilities farther down, like fire department, elementary school, or community center that can receive electricity during an outage. And this is basically different ways of how we would create benefits with the energy storage. So energy storage can definitely participate in the wholesale market. California is a great market to do that. There are lots of revenue streams that you can generate for energy storage. I don't want to go into those details, but this market is a great marketing for that growth. And also we are capable of addressing two of our huge issues that I was explaining before. So public safety power shutoffs that can be planned, or even an outage that is right away there, an emergency outage, immediate outage. We can address those with those technologies. So technology is available. The policy is a little bit behind. It's kind of keeping up on that, but we are very optimistic that California is going to be a great role model for the world. So that's how it can look like. We show here basically a smaller project where I call about 3 megawatts. You can imagine this is 15 acres of land that will be used for this kind of project with 2 containers of energy storage, 40-foot containers, typical one. And that's how we can provide to that load the electricity during an outage. That's the load throughout the whole year with the min and max. So those kind of studies, we go into detail. Now, opportunity, and then I'm coming to my end. So this is something that I thought I want to also talk about today, because innovation and I think vision about the future. This is something I started thinking about the last, let's say, 3 years. It came into my mind. So this is a cycle where a project starts, and basically it starts with this dot here. And we look at the project as a site, totally empty, greenfield development, that's what we call it. And then we need to get site control. And you see how I have identified the risk here. So this is continuing the development in that phase that you have to get interconnection. And then the risk is lowering a little bit. You have to get permitting and you have to sell the electricity. And those steps are basically decreasing the risk. So what basically our role is as a developer is we have to find ways how to use our capital to invest into this high risk, going to a mid risk and mitigate the risk. So what can blockchain do there? In this area of development, because it's high risky, there is a big, let's say, trust issue or difficulty for many investors to gain a belief into what's really happening if there is no project out there. Blockchain has the ability to basically allocate the capital that is invested to each of those stages. And we have seen in our development cycle about 200 different tasks or milestones that are important that can be break through into blockchain technology. We're very happy to support those ideas. If anyone wants to do this and the audience is really ready for learning more about how blockchain can really create the benefit there. And this would be a game changer because there are then much more trust into this early stage of development and into this area of development. And one thing I don't want to be forgotten, it is so important to have more and more good developed projects because the projects that are financeable, they're out there, they're going to be implemented, but we see a huge need in the development area. And I think I'm coming to my end. I want to thank everyone and it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Ardi. If it's okay, we'll just move straight into Mark Bernstein and then maybe deal with a few questions and comments to accelerate our schedule a little bit. So, Mark, I'm probably not going to get this totally right, but Mark was faculty at UTenn, has a PhD in economics and policy, and it's a great segue actually from this. Was also faculty at USC, and then got wise, unlike some of the rest of us in the room. But it's a nice segue from Ardi's talk because I think Mark's going to actually tell us where we're leaving some cash on the table in terms of the opportunities with respect to policy, and perhaps could even comment in his own talk what we've just seen from Ardi. If not, I will ask questions.
But I will comment, Ardi, that there's been a lot of success on growing plants underneath solar panels. So it's not just the pollinators; it's actually people doing tomatoes, people doing other things. I can just move myself. It's okay.
You have to click on the slide.
Oh, I can't just do this. No.
And then you have to click on the.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna do something a little bit different, and I'll just very briefly tell you what I'm doing in terms of my nonprofit, just very briefly. But it segues into the whole CleanTech thing. So we're a nonprofit trying to inspire climate action through presenting people with a positive clean tech vision of the future. We know that the climate messaging isn't working, right? We're telling people they're going to die. We are telling people it's too late. That really does not get people to want to do anything about it. If you want to get people to do something about it, you got to give them some hope. You got to give them something to strive for. And CleanTech is the place to do that. So we are getting ready to build video games, immersive experiences, to basically embed CleanTech into things that people see and do and get people excited about it, changing the game. So I've been doing CleanTech for a long time, long before we called it CleanTech, to work with startups and others. And so we'll talk a little bit about where the investment is happening and where it's not happening and the things that we ought to really pay more attention to. And the first thing we don't pay enough attention to is buildings. We don't comprehend the 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions that come about because of buildings. And we don't do enough to change it. It's not just new buildings. We've got good building codes in California, it's great, but it's this mass of existing buildings. And so the energy efficiency and changing things in existing buildings, we've been at it for a long time and we're just not doing it. I mean, a lighting retrofit in the building, there's a 6-month payback and you make money, you don't have to pay for anything, the guys come in and do it, and we still can't get it done. The governor reduced its budget and he had $5 billion to extend some natural gas plants lifetime. for blackout reasons, right? What I said is, we go out, there are a huge number of window air conditioners that are 20 years old living around Southern California. I'm actually doing the analysis now, I got some data. If we went out and just replaced all those old window air conditioning units, and these are low income families who don't get good service, go out and replace them all with brand new air conditioning units, we would save more energy than all those natural gas plants combined. So it's what we don't do, we don't pay enough about. And there's not enough investment. I'll show you that in a minute. But the other thing we don't do is things like food waste. How many people knew that food waste was 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions? You know, and it's a lot. It's a lot of water. It's a lot of materials. And you know, in the US, we are the worst at some level, but the world is 30%. And you know, we could feed the world twice over on all the food that we waste. And it's all throughout the street, right? It's a farm, it's in transportation, it's in making it. And if we started paying attention to technologies, and I've seen some, there are some technologies, some practices, we got to invest in those things to make a difference. There's we can have a bigger impact on greenhouse gas emissions dealing with food waste and dealing with low middle income energy efficiency in the US than pretty much anything else we're doing. But I'll show you some stats. The thing is, the VC and private equity community likes to invest in big shiny objects, right? You gotta be able to see it. So renewable energy, big projects, big things you can see. It's hard to invest in something you can never see, like this one company that I've seen, and all they do is blow sealant into ducts in commercial buildings. You can save 10% off the energy bill just by blowing sealant in ducts. If every building in the US, if we went and did that over the next year, we'd save more energy than anything else we can do. Also, not anti-renewable energy, but there are other things we can do. So we tend to invest in these things, and very little investment relatively in energy services and agricultural solutions. It's harder to get that startup money. It's harder to get that private equity money in things you can't see. And then when you, even like Silicon Valley Bank, that's did this nice, cool thing, and venture funding and maturity, and it's a really cool slide. I'm not going to get into it. But the thing is, when I looked at this, I was saying, okay, this is where they say all these investments are happening. Energy efficiency doesn't show up in here. We know it's happening, but they're not pushing. And if they don't push it, it's hard to see how other things get pushed. But then, if you look at the returns, fact is, the returns on some of these things you don't see are higher than the returns on some of these big renewable energy stuff. And so the value you're getting back, even though venture and private equity are investing in these things, are not getting the types of returns they could get if they did other things. It's hard. No, it's hard. It's hard to do lots of little things. I get it. Just a couple other bits and pieces, just so you see. So one of the interesting things that's happened last year or so is the number of types of deals in what they're now calling climate tech. All of a sudden, there's a name change, by the way. I call it CleanTech. Everybody's starting to call it climate tech. It's the same thing. The numbers of deals are going up. The amount of money is going up too, but what's interesting to me, and maybe I'm thinking things are starting to shift a little bit in the thinking, is there are a lot more startup money going in, smaller deals, and a lot more of the deals. So I'm a little bit optimistic there. Also from, if you look at the shareholder return in climate tech companies versus Standard & Poor's, I mean, people have been showing this for a while, that you can get high returns from these things. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. There's a lot of, back and forth, but the fact is, there's more resiliency in investing in these types of companies than in other things. And then we had some good news
on the front of sustainability with the new bill, climate bill. Best we can get. It's a good bill. There are things you've heard about. It's the tax credits for zero carbon electricity. That's good. Incentives for electric vehicles. They're okay. They could be better. Rebates for energy efficiency, but there are no rebates for replacing window air conditioning. I'm on this window air conditioning because I keep going around town and we see these old things and it's driving me nuts. They're talking about heat pumps. They're talking about central air conditioning systems and things. We got to do a little bit more than that. And there are incentives for domestic manufacturing is good. But the biggest thing I think that's there, particularly for this audience and for CleanTech, is the federal loans and loan guarantees, the $350 billion that the Department of Energy is going to push out over the next few years. That's huge, right? That is designed at startups. It's designed at new technologies. It's designed to get new things out there and out there fast. They're definitely filling in a funding gap because venture capital isn't really venture capital anymore. They're really private equity. And there's this, you've got some seed over here, and you got venture capital, which is really private equity. And you've got this big gap. That's the Department of Energy is going to fill that. They're going to need to hire a whole boatload of people over the next few months to start putting that out. So if anybody's looking for a job, DOE is going to be hiring a bunch of people who know anything about, technology and giving loans and things like that. But one of the things people hear about, and you may remember this company Solyndra from a number of years back. They got this big loan, and the Republicans all picked up on this because it was like $500 million, and the company went bankrupt, and all that stuff. And that happens, right? You invest in startups, you invest in new technology, things are going to happen. But the fact is, of the $30 billion that started in the Bush administration, by the way, which the Republicans forget to tell you, sorry, I shouldn't say it. 40% has already been repaid, and over $530 million in interest been paid. That's a pretty good track record for something that's investing in really risky companies. And relatively few of them have gone bust. So they've actually done pretty well. And what's the biggest company that got helped? Tesla. Tesla got some of that early money, made a big difference. Will it help? I think it'll help. We'll see. It depends on how they actually push the money out and where they push it out. And then I just want to do one more thing here, which is give you a little taste of some of the technologies that I've actually been involved with over the last few years. Because I'm optimistic. The reason I'm optimistic is I see lots of great companies, young people doing lots of really cool stuff, and technology and things is going to make a difference. Actually, when I was a professor here, one of my students in my class said I changed his world in the class. Okay, we'll do that. But he then came back to me with this business plan. He said, I got this idea in your class, and they are the first company to recycle rare earth magnets. They're recycling neodymium magnets. They're outside of Austin, Texas. That's their new factory, just built. He is 5 years out of undergraduate at USC, CEO of this company. They raised $40 million. They're on a $200 million raise now. They're taking those magnets out of hard drives that Amazon throws out 1 million a day or some huge numbers like that. All those data servers, hard drives. The thing about those magnets, they're all in the same place. Who makes the hard drive? And these magnets are in everything. They're in wind turbines, they're in sonar equipment, they're in sensor equipment. The military depends on these magnets that all come from China, not just the rare earth, the magnets themselves all come from China. There's enough thrown out that we could satisfy pretty much all the US needs from the stuff that's thrown out. They're 99.5% recycled materials in there. And they've also innovated the actual using less rare earths materials for the same magnet. So they're really cool stuff. DT Materials are making hempcrete. So they're using hemp waste fibers and making an insulation, and they are outperforming fiberglass in their insulation, and they're out and they're able to make it as cheap as fiberglass. It's the first technology. These young kids came out of San Luis Obispo, Polytechnic, whatever it is, Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. Brilliant guys. Ampere, they're out of Hawthorne now. They flew the first hybrid electric airplane 1,800 miles from Hawthorne to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for the air show. 75% less fuel used than in a traditional plane. They're flying, that's their 6-seater. It's a Cessna plane. It's a hybrid. So it's got a electric engine and a regular fuel engine. They will have FAA certification by the end of next year to fly this commercially. They've already flying test flights on Hawaii. This thing under that, these are the batteries down in there. They land, pop out the batteries, pop in a fresh one. You're not waiting for them to recharge, and off they go. They're using these really cool high efficiency battery stuff. They're building for NASA a 19-seater electric plane. And also the Army, it's a NASA Army combination thing, because if you want to fly a plane and if it's electric, it's really quiet. So you can fly in places that you don't want to. And then I also work with Intrinsic Exchange Group, and they are building these new natural asset companies. So it's a way to use the marketplace to basically help solve environmental problems. The New York Stock Exchange is going to run their IPOs. Their first one is going to be in rainforest in Costa Rica. They're within 2 months we'll have SEC approval. First time be able to do a company like that. So you see, there's just this great stuff that's going on that I'm really excited about. The other thing we've done at Earthshot is we have a portal called CleanTech School Portal. Our first one is out. It's on solutions for buildings. Check it out on our website. We've got about 650 solutions on there now. We'll just keep building it up. It's an AI-based tool that's finding solutions for buildings. And I'm happy to chat about these things. You can tell I'm excited about CleanTech, excited about the young people that are involved in it. And there's one company here that's doing really cool stuff as well, that I talked to them, and that's it. Thanks a lot. And move on to the next speaker.
Ron, can we save discussions until after the 4 speakers?
Yes.
Okay. Our next speaker is actually online, David Tennenhouse. And actually, I think David will be able to speak to some of the things that Ardi was also talking about with some great detail. I will let him talk about his position with respect to blockchain and the crypto winter. David has a PhD from the University of Cambridge, if I'm correct. I hope he's nodding. Yes, he's smiling and nodding. And he's also a seasoned, in a nice way, seasoned entrepreneur from up north, including VMware, Microsoft, and Sun Microsystems, if I got that right. We never got to talk about that. So without further ado, I'm going to let David actually move straight into a more technical discussion on blockchain.
Oh no. Back on the video.
Okay, thank you. But I need somebody to stop sharing at that end so I can.
There you go. Here you
Now
go.
we pin him.
Thank you.
Pin him. Yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
And now we need to make.
Can we do a sound check, David? You say something.
Yes, I'm saying something.
Can we get him on there?
You should be able to hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Battery 100%. Test.
Dave, can you answer your phone and use your phone for speaking?
No, that's not going to work well. We can't do audio through here.
Okay.
Can we do audio through Zoom, or we can't do that?
Yeah. Well, we can do that too. Let's do the Bluetooth from here and connect it to this one. Give me 1 second, Dave. I'm gonna just connect the Bluetooth here.
Okay.
Ready to connect another device. Test disconnected. iPhone Disconnected.
You see it? Ah, perfect. Okay, Dave.
Okay, we're good.
Almost. Give me one more second. Let me switch you to. You're connected, right? Audio. It is connected, right?
It should be here, right? Hold on, pause it. So, somewhere.
Ready to connect.
Can you go on the
Zoom.
Zoom, yeah, and then choose
Audio setting.
speakers? Samsung. What is the go on audio settings? Speakers. It's not connected.
Okay, we can try the phone if there's no choice. It's just the signal here is not very good.
So some here it's not connected yet, and
Yeah, let's go again. And try to do it one more time.
into pause it.
Yeah, so that's not there.
So right control says
Connecting. Everyone can hear a link for
did it say it's connected?
the what's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one, so we can compare it.
The Bluetooth.
Ah.
Are you on the Bluetooth?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. David, talk.
Dave, can you say something, please?
Yep, test. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, perfect.
Good.
All right. Okay, great. Well, it's really great to be here with you this evening. Notwithstanding some of the technology challenges, I've had the pleasure of working on sustainability at Microsoft. And when I was at VMware, my team created VMware's enterprise blockchain business. So today I'm going to talk about the interaction and opportunities between blockchain and CleanTech. It's as our moderator mentioned, David mentioned, it's a bit of a difficult time because we're in the middle of what's been called the crypto winter. I'm not actually personally a big fan of cryptocurrencies. I'm a big fan of blockchain, not necessarily the cryptocurrencies, but even with notwithstanding we're in a crypto winter, if you look at the volumes, there's still a substantial amount of this cryptocurrency being traded. So it's clear that there's something going on here. To me, even more interesting than that is that the so-called algorithmic stable coins cratered and they're sort of gone. But the stable coins that were backed up by assets, so the ones that are backed up by financial assets, they actually did surprisingly well, even during the very kind of difficult trading periods in the spring. So I think when people look back in this time, there's an unwritten story that they're going to start talking about, that these stable coins started looking somewhat like money market funds, right? They didn't really significantly break the buck. Again, that's with a focus on the ones that are actually anchored in financial assets. So, it's notwithstanding the crypto winter, let's not throw the blockchain baby out with the bathwater. So tonight I want to talk about, sort of basically two topics, and Ardi already kind of started a little bit on one, which I'll get back to, which is the applications of blockchain to CleanTech. Before I do that, I'm going to speak quite a bit about, this challenge of energy intensity, sort of how much energy does blockchain use? Many of you have probably read headlines like these, particularly about Bitcoin. And it's pretty clear that its energy use is a bad idea. And the good news that I'm really here to discuss with you is that blockchains don't have to be energy hogs. It's not really fundamental that they need to be. It is core to the Bitcoin design, but other kinds of blockchains can be quite energy efficient. So something to realize in that sense is that there was sort of an unfortunate alliance just historically that, a couple of cool technologies came together, got used together with and fused with the idea, which is really an ideology of cryptocurrencies, people wanting to have their own currency that wasn't part of a sovereign or a fiat currency. And that also got fused really wanted to preserve anonymity. So you essentially got these things in Bitcoin and Ethereum really all bound up together. And, that's kind of unfortunate because it wasn't really necessary. But I want to focus in on the two enabling technologies, which are really the idea of having a decentralized ledger, which all these blockchains, that's kind of why we call it a blockchain, and the ability to operate smart contracts where essentially you can set up a contract where as soon as the conditions of the contracts are fulfilled, boom, the transaction goes through. So you're really allowing the software to implement the contract. And with those two technologies, we can implement lots of really amazing applications and services. So drilling down on the ledgers, because they're kind of at the core of all this, for a long time, we've had the notion of centralized ledgers where you can have a trusted third party that keeps a record of all the transactions and everything goes through one place. You can think of like the New York Stock Exchange as doing that. And the ticker represents, the ledger. All the transactions come out in a given order. So the core notion here is that we don't have to have just one party keeping the ledger. We can actually have a decentralized ledger where different parties that don't necessarily even fully trust each other can cooperate on keeping the ledger. And they use the consensus protocol to ensure that all their parties' copies of the ledger are identical. So we actually can treat this as a single source of truth. Now, a clear challenge there is, well, what if we have a bad actor or somebody who's compromised or deliberately cheats? Well, we have to design the consensus protocol so it's based on voting, right? And as long as a high enough fraction of the votes agree to accept a transaction, and usually we kind of vote on a whole block of transactions at once, then the transaction or that block will be recorded and accepted by the group. So if you now reduce this to what does an implementation look like, you essentially have these blocks of transactions. And if we look at the one in the middle, what happens is we use cryptography to first off sign that whole block so that you can't tamper with that block. If somebody sees that block, they see the crypto signature, they know that that block hasn't been tampered with. And in the block, we include a pointer to the prior block. So effectively, we chain the blocks together, and that's why it's called blockchain. So those basic ideas allow us to now have these decentralized ledgers. And with that, we can basically rethink how we deal with trust. Because historically, we've used centralized trust. Whenever we want to transact between parties, we find a trusted third party. If two parties want to do something, or even multiple parties, they find a trusted third party who basically acts as the keeper of the ledgers. The catch there is that not only are you dependent on that third party, but if something happens and that third party has, an insider attack or a supplier attack, something like that, the whole system's compromised. With decentralized trust, you're basically trading, having that one centralized party with safety in numbers. Is the approach, right? We're trusting that maybe a few participants in the voting scheme will be compromised, but the bulk of the participants won't. So that's kind of the core thing going on here. And once we have that, we can get a lot of improvements. Okay, so that seems pretty straightforward. Why does Bitcoin consume so much energy, right? Well, the catch is that you could have competing proposals for what the next block is to be added to the chain. And the group has to decide which of the different proposals is going to be accepted and really added. And that's got to be part of the consensus protocol. In Bitcoin, the members of the, voting members, who are basically the miners, compete to see who can solve a difficult cryptography puzzle first, right? Whoever solves it first, their block gets added to the chain, and they also get a financial reward. So they compete aggressively to solve this puzzle first. The catch is solving that puzzle takes a lot of computational work. So when they do solve the puzzle, they're able to generate a math proof to convince everyone else that they solved it. So that proof is essentially a proof that they did a whole bunch of computational work to solve this cryptography puzzle. Proof of work is the same as proof of energy wasted, right? Work, energy. So this is, on the surface a bad idea, but it gets even worse, right? You want to make sure that ties don't, happen very often where two people at the same time solve the puzzle. So what you can do is sort of make it take a while. So there's, the puzzle gets solved less frequently. So statistically, it's less likely you're going to get a tie. The way you do that is you make sure the puzzles are hard. As the miners get better and better at solving the puzzles, because they apply more computational power, do more work to try to solve them, they get faster at solving puzzles. The Bitcoin system adapts and makes the puzzles harder. So this system is really geared to create an arms race, an escalated race to see who can waste the most energy. That's insane. And I went on record a number of years ago to say that, proof of work is immoral. Just to put this in context, with Bitcoin, it's about 1 to 2 megawatt hours that's spent, running this consensus protocol for every transaction that goes through. So think of that as $100 to $200 of energy, 50 days of a US household. By the way, that doesn't mean that every transaction using Bitcoin has to cost that much, because, in effect, many people could actually just settle the transactions amongst themselves and then only record the net transactions on the blockchain. So there's kind of ways to reduce that, but inherently this proof of work thing is really outrageous. So the good news here is blockchains don't have to be based on proof of work, right? The Bitcoin blockchain went down that path, but there are many other consensus themes. As I indicated, they pretty much all depend on some form of voting. So it comes down to who gets to vote and how many votes do they get. In proof of work, your voting is based on, it's kind of proportional to the computational power that you expend. There's an alternative called proof of authority, which is basically saying, let's appoint a group of people based on their reputation or based on their membership of a group. For example, the large chartered banks that are recognized by the Federal Reserve could form a blockchain and agree that they'll each get one vote, and they'll each operate one copy of the ledger. And that would be a proof of authority system. And in a sense, almost all the enterprise blockchains are based on that approach today. Proof of stake is an alternative for public blockchains, where what you essentially do is allocate more voting rights to people that have more currency, essentially more money. It may not be measured in dollars, it may be measured in algos if you're on the Algorand chain, or in Ether if you're on Ethereum. But essentially, the more money you have, the more votes you get. Now, there's a catch here, which is that people could still cheat. So the way you discourage cheating is, if you want to be one of the voting members, you actually have to put up your currency and escrow it, stake it. And if you get caught cheating, you're going to lose your currency. But basically, this says there are alternatives that are much more energy efficient. So enterprise systems are typically based on authority or membership. And Ethereum, which is the second largest of the blockchains today, which currently runs on proof of work, is transitioning to proof of stake. And the whole community is kind of holding its breath, because that transition, called the merge, is supposed to happen in September. It's been delayed a number of times, and everybody's kind of hoping it will go ahead. And in addition to Ethereum, many other permissionless systems are already based on proof of stake. I mentioned Algorand. There's a number of others. So hopefully, in this discussion, I've kind of slayed the energy intensity dragon. You'll still have, after the Ethereum merge, we'll still have Bitcoin out there consuming quite a lot. My guess is that its consumption will taper off over time. as the other blockchains become more successful, because people will prefer the energy, low energy approach. Then let's talk about the applications. And Ardi already mentioned, one kind of good class of applications. It fits sort of within my first bullet here, which is today, if you have RECs or carbon credits, so when people launch projects like Ardi, many large companies are really excited about those because they want to offset their carbon usage. And so they may want to buy into those projects and help encourage them to happen in return for getting credit for essentially the carbon that's going to not be released into the environment. You want to have a system for trading those RECs. That could be on the blockchain. More importantly, you end up wanting to have a system for managing the integrity. For being, as already indicated, you want to monitor these projects, from the start, from the planning phase all the way through, to make sure that not only, as already indicated, that the risk is going down as the project works through, but the CleanTech intent is being preserved and honored. And so you really know you're kind of getting that saving in carbon that you were investing in. There's a number of other really good opportunities, and Ardi actually also indicated one of these, which is in the distributed grid space, and another that has to do with supply chains. Let me just touch on those briefly. And since we're here in a sort of Swiss related forum, I chose an example from Equigi. They're working with Swiss Grid and others in Europe. And the key here, as already mentioned, you're starting to get a bunch of distributed energy resources. So you're getting, instead of a small number of large transmission-based resources that are generating power, you have a large number of these distributed resources. Many of these are even smaller than the ones Ardi was talking about, right? These can be mom and pop with a little bit of solar, or somebody who's put a windmill in the farm, they are now generating power. That's probably, they're going to do a deal probably with an aggregator who's going to aggregate that power, and that aggregator needs to interact with, in California, it would be the system operator, because as most of you probably know, electricity markets have to be exquisitely balanced, right? There has to be pretty much an exact balance with the power either being generated or coming into the grid from batteries. Has to be balanced with the power being consumed. So there's a real-time need to do this, and that means that you would like to have these DERs actually enter into smart contract commitments under the terms of exactly when they're going to sell their power, how much they'll sell. And by the way, the DERs may even have restrictions on what sort of uses they'll sell it for, right? They may have preferences that they only want to sell it for CleanTech uses. And not, for example, to somebody that's going to be running a polluting factory. So lots of opportunities here to use blockchain to sort of help manage this exchange through between the DERs and balance out the platform. Equigi, this is just a snapshot of their architecture. At the bottom, you've got the internet handling all the communication. In the middle, you see that trusted data layer. That's really where they're using a blockchain. And then above that, they have a whole range of interesting services. So this is not about cryptocurrencies, et cetera. It's about using blockchains to facilitate smart contracts and really interesting transactions. So finally, I just want to talk about another application, because there's more to CleanTech than energy, right? And so I'm going to differ with one of the prior speakers and say, well, CleanTech and climate tech aren't exactly the same, because climate tech is part of CleanTech. There's other places, particularly in the supply chain, the consumer all the way out to the right here at the retail end would like to get assurances that the stuff that they're buying was sustainably produced, right? That could be food coming from a farm, was sustainably produced, but it could be pretty much anything else, right? It could be that they want to know that new laptop or PC or cell phone or whatever they're buying was produced in a sustainable way, both in terms of the embedded carbon that went into it, but also the materials that were used and water use, et cetera. So there's tremendous opportunities here to use blockchain to track the provenance of these things all the way through from the initial source farm, et cetera, through to retail. And along the way, by the way, interestingly, not just track the provenance for clean tech reasons, but generate a lot of operating efficiencies. For example, every time a good passes through the supply chain, somebody was probably loaning money to the producer of that good at that stage. When ownership passes down the chain, that loan's going to be released, and probably a new loan's going to be put in place to the next person that acquires it. So there's a lot of for each of these physical goods that you'd like to tokenize and represent on the blockchain, you're also going to have sort of logical goods and financing that go with it. So we can think about the tokenization of both physical assets and digital assets getting represented on the chain. So realize a lot in there. I'm going to stop now, and thank you very much.
David, I don't know if you heard it, but you got huge applause here.
I'm sorry, we got what?
You got huge applause here. I don't know. If you
Thank you. Gee, that's, we heard all that feedback before, but we didn't hear the applause.
Yeah.
David, that was excellent. Thank you so much. I am going to just roll straight into Adam's talk and save time for Q&A for all four of you, if that's okay at the end. While they get Adam hooked up, I'm going to just introduce the last speaker a little bit. Adam's actually going to talk about what I like to say is ideas are easy, but execution is everything. And from what I understand, Adam is actually, again, a serial entrepreneur from up in the Bay, has done numerous things, some which overlap with some of my interests, I must say, in terms of modular construction and buildings, and some that are from other disciplines and markets. I think the real point for us ending with Adam is to teach us or to remind us that execution is everything. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Adam. How was that?
Thank you. Let's see. Sounds like there's some echo. We okay? Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, does that work?
Yep.
All right. So thank you guys. My name's Adam Tibbs, and I hate the definition of serial or the nomenclature around serial entrepreneur. But I was lucky enough. I started my first company when I was 14 and sold it when I was 18, and went to college and started my second company when I was 20 and sold it when I was 22. So I've been able to kind of have my hand in a lot of different ideas and industries and companies and kind of build them up from scratch and develop, to the extent that anyone can, a set of expertise in just that. And so what I'm hoping to do today is just to relate some of my experience in developing some of these companies, specifically how to convert like an idea, right? And how to identify what a good idea is, and then if it's a good idea, are you willing to invest 5-10 years of your life in building it out and seeing if it works? So picking the idea at the very beginning is really critical, whether you're starting the company yourself or joining another company that's smaller in scale. And then, the second piece of that, of course, is, if it's a good idea and it's possible to grow, how the heck do you do that? So without further ado, I'll just dive right in. So for me, there's been a handful of filters that I've really focused on as I've been kind of starting companies. And in retrospect, not all of the companies that I've started fall into these categories, but the filters really apply now for me more than ever, just because I have a higher volume of ideas that I can work with. So the very first notion is, do I believe that the idea is inevitable, that the execution of that idea is inevitable? What I mean by that is just simply like, is it going to exist with this person or that company or another? Doesn't matter, it's going to happen. And if I don't necessarily believe that, I don't dig in. The second is around the technology. Is it actually, there's a lot of ideas out there that aren't really doable, right? That the technology doesn't exist, or it's way too out in the future. And that can be really cool stuff that's in R&D, that's within a university. That's almost all of life science is falls into this category. And for me, I just don't. I can't grok it enough to be able to spend 10 years of R&D to get out into the marketplace. I like stuff that is doable now. The third is just around the team, right? Like, can we build team to execute this idea? And specifically, when you're looking at technology and you're looking at things that are doable today, you have to be innovative, right? If the technology is actually available, then why isn't it more widespread? And then finally, is the idea big enough, right? Is there's a ton of businesses that are great, that are cash flow based businesses, or that are, I've got a handful of companies that are just mailbox money, right? They just like send me a check every month, and that's great. But if you're really going to focus on where your career is going, or where your investment's going, or where your time is going, I feel like you have to have some kind of exponential type expectations returns. So let's just kind of walk through those assumptions, if I may. So by inevitable, there are a ton of great companies and great ideas that are not inevitable at all. Uber, Airbnb, for example, I don't believe those were inevitable. Like, it seems crazy to me, go back a decade, crazy that someone would expect people to let strangers into their car and drive them around, or let strangers into their house and pay them to stay there. That's insane. That's not inevitable to me at all. Same with Facebook. Facebook is like a product insight. And so literally with these three companies, I missed out. Like, I was given the opportunity to invest in all three of these and lost that opportunity because I just didn't believe in it. It seemed nuts. Versus other companies, right? Like Amazon or Tesla, or there's a little typo here, a company that I'll put a plug in for that I'm working with now. But Amazon is basically just an extension of current practices. It was inevitable that someone would make an online department store, right? Which is all Amazon is, layered on top of an incredible amount of operational brilliance. Tesla, right? Like 100 years later, right? We're finally like doing something to improve the combustion engine, which was a horrible idea in the first place, and required this incredibly complex supply chain, i.e., gasoline, to make the model even work. And the company that I'm working with now, I also think has the potential of these two companies. Is called Ubiquitous Energy, and what they've developed is a coating that turns whatever surface that coating is applied to into a solar panel. And they're going to market first with Windows, which I think is just absolutely brilliant. But you can imagine your cell phone having this coating on it. You don't need to plug it in, you put it out in the sun. So I believe that type of thing is inevitable. So when you're looking at opportunities, you really have to think about like, which of these two categories does that company or opportunity or idea fall into? The second category is just around, is it doable, right? Is the technology there? Back, about 15 years ago, I had a company that was called Blue Tip, which was a it's an incubator of sorts. So a group of us, four of us, sold a company and rolled all the assets into a company called Blue Tip, which came up with ideas and then executed them, and then built up those businesses. And on a weekly basis, what we would do is we would say the four partners would get together and just challenge ourselves to come up with the lightest weight technology that could be applied retroactively to change the world, right? So some kind of anachronistic version, so kind of the opposite of the DeLorean reference earlier. And so think what would happen if you could have introduced FedEx, into World War II, or what would happen if Mary Queen of Scots had a fax machine, right? So that was the general notion. And my the creative director of the company said, okay, trash bags, right? That is the #1 technology that could have changed everything. And I was like, what are you talking about? And his answer stays with me till today, which was, he said, okay, what if you would have given Napoleon a bunch of trash bags, right? And so without getting too pedantic here, Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812. 700,000 soldiers marched from Poland to Moscow, and only 70,000 came back. So 90% death, like a 90% attrition. And a bunch of that was supply chain issues and just logistical problems. But the vast majority of those deaths were actually related to just, and if you look at this, this kind of a famous chart that was developed in like 1850, but Tufte kind of popularized it. And what it shows is the brown piece of this is kind of overlaid on a map that goes toward Moscow, and the width of the brown slut mark there is how many. It started off at 700,000 people, and you start to see it get narrower and narrower as it gets to Moscow, and then the black is coming back from Moscow. And what you'll see is like all those vertical lines are rivers, right? So the soldiers would actually cross rivers, get wet, and die, right? And and so if you were to have just given trash bags to the soldiers to put on their feet as they forded these rivers, the outcome would have been very different, and we would probably all be speaking French now instead of English. So like the technology itself doesn't need to be game changing. What really needs to happen is using it in an innovative way. And so you've got an inevitable idea with some innovative use of technology, and you've got your hand on something. So to put this in a more concrete example around technology that's actually available, concurrent with the business model, as you look at like cars. One of the companies that started was called Project Frog, and it was all about like lean production, and I'll get into that in a second. But it made me really kind of study lean methodologies and supply chain and innovation around technology of hardware. And everybody thinks that Henry Ford was kind of the inventor of the modern car production, but that wasn't necessarily true. Like what actually happened was that if you go back to 1905, give or take, there was a book written called On the Art of Cutting Metals, bestseller, and this guy named Henry Leland read it. And what had happened, like when cars were being made back then, it was all crap. Everything was handmade. The engine was handmade. The steel was forged on a one-off basis. And so what Henry Leland learned from reading this book is that actually you can pre-forge an engine block and be able to cut it up in a persistent and consistent manner that would enable you to do 100 pieces at a time, and then kind of put them together, and you didn't have to create each engine on a one-off basis. And that changed everything. And Henry Ford then said, oh, wait a second, if we can do that, then what we can do is have unskilled labor or minimally skilled labor kind of put everything together and created the assembly line. Right. So there was an academic paper that was kind of picked up by a technologist who applied that to engines and created the company Cadillac, which was then kind of brought into mass production by Henry Ford. So innovation of technology is absolutely key. It's not about inventing new technology. So that's kind of the second piece. And so to put that into more kind of modern terms, back in 2006, I co-founded a company called Project Frog, and that was born of frustration, right? And I think that most entrepreneurs and their ideas come from just being really frustrated with reality. In my case, I was doing a bunch of real estate development and just super frustrated. I don't know if any of you have built a house or even like remodeled. It's insane. There's so much head scratching that goes on site. Nothing is kind of pre-thought through, no matter how much it's anticipated to have been. What I saw when I started researching the problem is this graph, which is out of date, and I'm sure it's even further spread now. But what's happened is that the efficiency of construction has dropped dramatically, while the efficiency of manufacturing products has gotten way more efficient. And that to me just doesn't make any sense, right? Because if, again, going back to cars, on a cost per square footage basis, cars and buildings are about on par, right? But cars are smart, and they move, and they're waterproof, and they do everything the building does and more, and they cost the same on a cost per square footage basis as a dumb box, and that's insane. So what we did at Project Frog was say, okay, well, let's just steal all the technology that product design and development and have been doing, and let's bring that into the built environment. Number one, we just kind of sat down and thought and drew a bunch of diagrams and then got those patented. But infringed on our own patents. That was the whole notion of Project Frog. And what Project Frog did, we created buildings. The end result was buildings, but we got there through a pretty innovative way through our software. So what our software did is it enabled architects to design buildings, but then what we would do is we would analyze them and optimize them around resource utilization and energy efficiency and thermal comfort and daylighting and all the things that matter to humans that designers don't necessarily have the data to support, right? They have intuition, they have great design, they have aesthetics, but they don't have the actual science. So we enabled the science to do the optimization on behalf of the architects, and then ultimately create shop drawings and make the parts and get everything ready to go to actually build a building. So we created that set of patents, and then we created the software that would deliver that, and then we created the partnerships that would make all the stuff that we designed. And the way that we would do that, the way that we would make stuff, is that we kind of threw out the notion of let's completely ignore the design. Right. Let's instead just focus on what's the data that's driving the design. So the data was the most important thing, and visualization was irrelevant, which enabled us to do a whole heck of a lot via software quickly and inexpensively, because we didn't have to put a design layer on top of everything that we were doing. And so what that means in practice is that you've got, to take a very simple example, how much weight can a steel girder handle at various lengths and at various thicknesses. And so that's all it's just a spreadsheet. And so what we were able to do is, like, when an architect is putting a openings in one area or another, and that replicates and has ramifications throughout the building, we could just do the math around that and figure out what would be required to do that based on the design, handle the optimization, and then shoot it out to shop drawings, right? So we have steel fabricators in this example where we would literally, I just have back then an FTP site where the steel fabricators could just pull our shop drawings down, put that into their CNC machines or the equivalent, and just fabricate everything without any human touch from the design all the way to fabrication. And then we had a logistics software on top of that enabled things to be shipped out to site. But and this, the notion for me, back in like 2005 or so, I just realized that everything I need to do should be mission-based in one form or another. And so a big layer of what Project Frog did was, and a requirement of all of our buildings, was that we could create as much energy as we could, create as much energy as we used on the roof of the building. Right, that was the requirement. Every building had to be net zero capable. So part of the software would look at the orientation, the number of windows, the fenestration patterns, and look at like how that impacted daylighting and also heating and cooling. And so what this graph shows is that on the horizontal axis is just months of the year, and on the vertical what the exterior temperature is, and the graph itself shows how much heating or cooling energy is required to create a thermally comfortable environment. And then this piece here just shows how many PVs would need to be on the roof for that building to create a net zero building. So incredibly cool stuff that took building time from a year and a half down to about 4 months. That was something like 20% of the energy utilization and overall for a given building in terms of production, and even less in terms of operation. And so today we've done about north of 500 buildings all around the world for educational facilities, for medical facilities. We do a bunch of stuff for the military, and now the company's kind of on a next gen path, which isn't totally public, but really kind of interesting path around utilizing just in technology in an innovative way, right? We didn't invent anything. Everything was already there. All we did was kind of repurpose it. So that's 2. 3 is around, kind of product market fit, which in part, if what you believe is inevitable, if the company's product or service or whatever is inevitable, that's product market fit is kind of embedded in it. But, as a thought experiment, when you're thinking about a company, I believe you got to really say, look, is there an identifiable problem that we're solving? And is that problem big enough? And are the people who have the problem, do they acknowledge that it's a problem, right? And then finally, is it addressable? Can you find those people, right? So all of those pieces kind of come together to determine, do you have a product that could solve a problem that people want to be solved at an affordable way? And can you find them in an affordable way? And the kind of the next point is there are always early adopters, right? Like weird fact is that sheetrock, right, was introduced 65 years before it was the common practice, right? Way cheaper, way better in many respects, but the practitioners just didn't buy into it. And so can you find, when you're thinking about a company, can you find accelerating customers who are going to get the company or the product beyond that early adopter phase, beyond the fast follower phase? Can you get into, the mass market adoption? And can you find customers who can help you do that? And then, obviously, differentiating yourself in your go-to-market strategy or your sales strategy, that also has to be there. So you can't just have innovation around the product, you also have innovation around the delivery and sale of that product. And then, so all of that, put that in a bucket to the side. At the very earliest stages, you have to have some notion of, can you get a customer? Can someone want to buy this thing? Can you test all of these assumptions in a really inexpensive way to prove out whether there's a business there at all? And if so, are there growth hacks? So another company I had was called the Parasailer. We did, we help people finance stuff. And what we would do is we hired a crew of people to go to the websites of our potential customers and just pretend to be customers of Parasails and say, hey, do you take Parasail? Right? Is that a product that you accept? And 99% of the time they didn't. We were a little startup, right? But the very first thing that company would do is look up Parasail. And so we had a whole easy setup process that would happen. And we went from 0 customers to about 9,000 customers in 2 weeks doing that. So, the little growth hacks are absolutely crucial. And so if you can't think of a growth hack, it may be challenging to start that company. The next big piece before finding funding, right, is around just the right team. Right? And we all, everyone I know who started a company, it starts it with their friends, right? And that's totally wrong, right? Not because they're friends, but because you really need to hire or partner with internally the right people who have the right expertise. And so you have to absolutely go against your bias toward being inclusive of your network and actually flip it on its head and go way outside your network to find the right people in order to be successful. So, defining what do you need, and then going outside your personal network to fill that up. Now, that said, in the early days, it's all about utility, right? You just need a bunch of, the first 10 hires you have really are going to play a ton of different roles, and they all have to be crazy smart, and they all have to be good at not just, being the CTO, but also that CTO needs to really understand, the concerns of the CFO and vice versa. So that utility aspect as opposed to silo aspect is absolutely critical. That said, any small company that's just getting going, and I believe this is true for much bigger companies as well, need to identify where their gaps are with respect to their ability to scale, the ability to grow. What are the holes that are preventing them from getting to the ultimate revenue models that they're hoping to achieve? And that has to be done through partnerships, right? And so Project Frog, for example, we had a distributed manufacturing model where we just held the designs. That's what we owned, and we outsourced 100% of the manufacturing to the various expertise throughout US, Canada, Japan, Mexico, Canada. And what that enabled us to do was to really decrease our capital expenditure requirements, our CapEx requirements, but it also enabled us to move faster because we had more product in market faster. And we were, what's more, doing joint development efforts. We're really able to leverage our partners' insights and expertise in whatever product they already were developing. So we could kind of use our insights into market, our insights into product, and theirs to create something newer and better and cheaper. And then finally, funding. So I've raised, I don't know, $150 million or so for the various companies that I've been involved in, and it sucks. I hate raising money. Even if you do everything that I just described, you have great product market fit, you have the right team, you have the right technology, you have an innovative business model, you've got competitive advantage. it's still hard. You'll get funded. If you have all of those things, you'll get funded, but it takes a ton of time, right? It takes 6 months to raise a round of financing. That's kind of the bottom line is yeah, you got to raise money, but it's I'll stop there.
Adam, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. We are going to have a few minutes of Q&A. I'm going to try to keep it just sort of to 4 questions, one to each of you, really. Sorry, Adam, we're cutting you off because we're running out of time on our end. I actually want to go all the way back to Ardi. So here?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a question for you that it also actually applies to David and perhaps everybody on the panel, really. But my understanding, if we want to achieve real carbon neutrality, right, and we can look at this narrowly in the smart grid or the bidirectional energy market, like how do you actually account for the 3 levels in the sense of you have energy production, you have energy use, but you also have the entire supply chain. So when you're talking about carbon neutrality and achieving it, how do you actually prove that you're going to achieve it? And it's a leading question because it leads to other topics here.
Okay, that's an important question. And so say it again, the 3 was energy use.
Well, energy generation, energy use,
Yeah.
and the entire supply chain when we really want to understand carbon accounting.
Okay, good. So I think we are experiencing electrification. And definitely what I like that this the whole presentation about blockchain, and it's basically increasing also our electricity use. So electricity use and EVs and all of that, that's definitely going to be a huge thing. I think Mark also mentioned those, electric planes, they're going to come one day. So everything going to be electric. Like, I mean, that's so energy use is a key factor. But on the other hand, energy generation is, I guess, the most important answer to your question, I believe. I think that is important, how we source our electricity and in what way we source it. So that's at least the way I'm seeing it. I mean, I'm not having the full understanding of everything because I have my own little window of like what I'm doing in my business, and of course we are focusing on generation. But I believe everyone has his own way of arguing it. But all of those areas are important. But I would say generation.
So I'm going to hand it over to Mark. It's a similar and follow-on question, which is, I guess the context is we talk about, again, carbon neutrality. We understand we're level 1, level 2 really easily. We're doing it in university, and level 3 is really, really difficult. And you talked about the federal, the state, the financing options. You talk about how the shiny objects are getting all the investment. And that there are some other things out there that are equally important, perhaps even more impactful. How do we actually get people to understand that it's a bigger pond to play in?
Good question. Well, we really got to show the numbers. We've got to convince people that this stuff works and makes money. And 20 years ago it didn't, right? And so we were all kind of catching up to the fact that we were selling things that didn't make economic sense 20 years ago. And getting, I don't have the answer to that because I've been trying to do energy efficiency for 25 years, right? And so, and sort of successfully we got things happening, but not to the extent that we need to. And an example, and this is what I'm trying to work on this air conditioning thing. So during the energy crisis of 2000, 2001 in California, there was a program that happened that nobody really remembers much, but I was involved with because of somebody to get it in. And we did a refrigerator replacement program in Southern California and Northern California. We went house to house, looked at these gave them a new refrigerator, took out the old one, and if they had a second one, passed them to get rid of it.
And this is pre-starvation.
This pre-start, but this was, to reduce peak demand because of the electricity price, crisis that happened because of
Enron.
Enron and all those other things. And there were a lot of other things in it. And it worked. It really worked. And the peak demand went down. But that was a one-off program. We need to do more of those. We can't, the subsidy is all fine, but, we got to trickle down to the middle and lower income folks. And the only way to do that is government to pay for it.
No, don't say, say it, so.
How are you gonna get a lower income person who lives in a apartment building with a landlord that doesn't really care, and they have window air conditioning units? How are you gonna get them new air conditioning? They can't afford to pay for them.
Third party financing for our units.
We've been trying that for a long time.
Yeah. Promise.
Well, we can take that conversation further afterwards, but that I appreciate it as well. I actually wanted to move to David Tennenhouse. I wanted to thank you for clarifying the energy suck that the blockchains have gained a reputation for. I really appreciated the escalated arms race, and now understand proof of work is really bad. I have to give you credit for that. The question I have for you is perhaps a bit tangential, but when we think about the water and the energy nexus, right, this is actually a compounding problem, which relates to everybody in the room in the sense of clean tech, perhaps. How do you imagine that? Ostensibly, I'm focused on the smart contracts part of the value, helping with that dual problem. Energy production being completely the largest consumer is water, and the largest consumer of water is energy. And how are smart contracts actually going to make a difference?
Well, I guess I'm going to back up a little bit to two of the prior questions, right? And it will get to your third question here. The first question was, essentially an accounting question of how do you account through the supply chain, right? There's the energy you use, there's the energy that's used to produce that energy, and then there's this third category, which is everything else in your supply chain. And the positive thing there is, if you're a large company today, you're probably filling out a carbon accounting report, and there are actually organizations that are auditing this and actually, calling companies to account to work out. Those are called scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So there's actually formal terms. So the reason I say that is once we start actually accounting for these things, we can start recording them on the blockchain. You can imagine starting to have trading for them. So I think, we can, if you go back in time, and this is not my observation, it's from a colleague at MIT, that we did a great job actually of addressing the acid rain problem that we had a number of decades ago. And that was through a cap and trade type solution. And we probably need to get much more aggressive about that. And a starting point for that's going to be this accounting. Once you have the accounting, you can start using the blockchain to maintain those ledgers, to do the trading, to break things down into much smaller transactions. So it's not just large companies doing this kind of accounting, but it can be done at all levels. Now, the relationship here to the second question is that I think one of the big, or it's really to the answer to the second question, which I think was really good, is one of the big changes compared to 20 years ago is we've made huge progress, right, with solar and wind, and we now can produce for less than the other things. And, so beating back physics, I can tell you from my Intel experience, is really, really hard, right? But now that the physics has been beat back on the generation side, we can now start applying software. And again, this is where blockchain and smart contracts can come into play to wring the efficiencies out of having beat back physics. I mean, as Adam indicated, now the invention's been done on that generation side. The innovators can kind of pile in, and I think I'm actually hugely optimistic about what the innovators are going to be able to do in terms of our ability to handle the supply side. Batteries, we're still beating back physics. So I'm just, only really hoping that in, 10, 20 years, if we beat back the physics on the battery problem, we'll be able to have another revolution there. So it's not going to be all really about blockchain by any means. However, I think thinking more broadly, software and the abilities software and networking give us to leverage those inventions, wrap innovations around them. There, I'm hugely optimistic.
Can I add one comment just back on the energy use? It's not just cryptocurrency and it's not just blockchain. It's data centers and everything we do. When you're on Google Maps and it's trying to find your route, that's going to a data center somewhere. And the amount of data centers that are being built are just unbelievable. Yep. And there's at least 30% unused capacity in existing data centers. And where are they building data centers? In the middle of a desert, which from an energy standpoint makes absolutely no sense because you've got to cool these things.
Yeah.
Just
actually, that's not correct. If you look at the really large data centers by the large players, they are very, very good at locating their data centers where renewable energy is available, largely speaking. And if not, they're going out and creating sources of renewable energy where they can. So where I will agree with you is we are consuming more and more energy to do computation and storage. And the question is, does that computation and storage save us more on the positive side of the ledger, right? So Google Maps is a great example. Google Maps is generating enormous savings in terms of people on delivery routes and all sorts of other things, not, getting stuck in traffic, not going through circuitous longer paths. You'll notice that Google is trying to direct people down energy efficient paths now. So it's a great example. Yep, you use a lot of energy for the data center for Google Maps. It's nothing compared to the energy being saved by Google Maps. So
yeah, I don't disagree with you. But I will disagree on that. Data centers that are being built by existing renewable energy, which most of them are, doesn't help because somebody else was using that renewable energy before them and now they have to use something else. So some of them are building renewable energy, but there is an overcapacity. Right. I don't want to get into that argument.
No, it's absolutely correct, and you should get into it. You get the same argument with blockchain folks that sort of say, "Well, I'm using renewable energy," and where they're displacing somebody else that would use it. But if you look at Google, Microsoft, I think what you'll find is that they've been investing. When I was at Microsoft, we drove power purchase agreements. We could renewable energy to be installed. Google got there before us. They were doing way more of it than we were. So I think what you'd find is, again, for the hyperscalers, this is happening. There are many, many other data centers where it's not.
Adam, just to round out a last question before we open it up to the floor. Really excellent talk in terms of the challenges and your approach to building businesses. I guess what I would ask you is, outside of Project Frog, which I'm particularly interested in as an individual, where do you see the other market opportunities? There's a lot of diversity in this room, a lot of folks trying to build connections internationally between Switzerland and the United States and otherwise. Where would you tell people to be optimistic and look outside of the specific example, which you gave great detail about?
Built environment. Optimism and opportunity are not necessarily the same things, but where I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, and where I look a lot is toward water, right? And how best to enable conservation and delivery of water. Second is around waste. Right, so we've run at my house a zero waste home for about 3 years, and it's next to impossible. It's so hard and so expensive to just kind of decrease the amount of stuff that we use that's thrown away. And then kind of the third category is around packaging, right? I think that that's like my personal holy grail, is to really kind of look at, you know, how do we drastically improve packaging to reduce the carbon footprint of the packaging manufacturing and of the shipping, and create more efficient ways to deliver things, right? Because Amazon and Amazon-like companies are not going away. We're going to be getting boxes at our house delivered, you know, ad nauseum. So what do we do there? So those are kind of the three categories of things that I'm not currently working on that I would love to be working on, because I believe
Thank you, Adam. So I am going to open up to the floor. Does anybody have a super burning question they want to ask any one of the four speakers before I actually let Matt ask his question?
I mean, I have one question.
Please.
Okay. This question is for Adam. Hi.
Introduce yourself.
I was getting there. Hi, my name is Camila Pizarro, and I run a branding and marketing agency in LA with my partner Bill. And one of the things we're working on is that we actually do packaging. So that last little comment was just like blew my mind, you know, because it's so true. We're working on a company in that sector to actually try to like save waste. And one of the things in your presentation really stood out to me when you were talking about building teams. And I think I maybe have a completely wrong understanding. And you were talking about how when you build a team, it's best to look outside of your current network. And I'm just wondering, like, how would you go about doing that if you're already in that network and you're building like packages, and we're so involved in that world that, like, what do you mean exactly about looking outside of your network to build that team? Because to me, it seems like a no-brainer to go within my own network, but maybe I just misunderstood that part of your presentation.
No, I mean, I think that, and I guess it's a question of defining what your network is, right? But what I mean is that, you know, the vast majority of companies that I see or you know, get involved with in the very early stages are a group of friends who are doing X, Y, and Z, right? And the reality is that you to be successful, right, you really need to identify, okay, if I'm looking for a supply chain person, right, who's the very best supply chain person, and what's the definition of that role, and then going out and finding that versus, you know, who do I know who's relatively good at that? So how do you do that? You know, and this is the, you know, it's the paradox is that you can only do that through the strength of your network, right? But being really good about defining what you're looking for and broadcasting that out to the network that you have is way more important and ultimately, in my experience, leads to more success than finding someone who could do that job, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Thank you, Adam. Matt, I'm going to have you ask our last question before we start drinking.
Well, the question is, should I ask a question or should we start drinking?
Why are they mutually exclusive?
No, I think I'm gonna keep that question for next time, but I wanna do some closing remarks. It was a really remarkable session, and I want to say thank you for all our keynote speakers and panel participants. I was listening a little bit in the audience about the echo, and the sentiment and the feedback that I got was outstanding. So thank you very much for taking the time and be with us today, either here on site and virtually. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and stay optimistic. We can do this thing.
We will. Earthshot is gonna need your anecdote right there.
Furthermore, I want to say a couple more words for the chamber and what we are going to do going forward. So our main mission is to facilitate business growth between Southern California and Switzerland. So I don't know to what extent you're already aware of how intense that relationships between the United States and Switzerland are. Switzerland is the 6th largest direct investor into the United States, and the same also in California. And Southern California in specific has a little been diminished in the past 20 years of the radar of Swiss interest, right? So all the large Swiss players, they moved out of state. Most of the new kind of ventures, they didn't end up anymore in California or in Southern California. They either went to Massachusetts, New Jersey, Silicon Valley, and now also they go to Texas, they go to Florida. But looking at the economic power that Southern California has, right? Almost $2 trillion on GDP. I mean, it's the 13th largest economy in the world. If Southern California will be its own country. So having said that, and now we're looking at those technologies, CleanTech, agri-tech, food tech, life science, digital health. These are technologies that will define not only let's say, sustainability of society and the planet as such, but also it will define healthy growth, right? In terms of growth is, we can't deny growth, right? We're kind of, somehow prone to growth, we have to grow, but we need to grow in a more smart and in a more sustainable way. So when we eat more, for example, yeah, we can eat more meat, but then let's do not kill animals anymore and use water resources like, small countries to raise cattle, right? We need to find alternatives. And for example, in food technology, there are many, many technologies coming towards the market. And Switzerland has a lot of innovation, has a lot of IP, has a lot of smart folks that are developing this. The same is in Southern California. Here, society, the people, the economy is prone to make use of those technologies, to look for FDI coming in here and actually drive those specific domains and accelerate that growth going forward. So our mission is to build a hub here to kind of foster that exchange again between Southern California and Switzerland and combine those leading, let's say, platforms like subject matter experts from a technology side, the academics like USC and universities, like the governmental institutions. So because we are running out of time, the deputy director of the state of California actually gave us a video messaging for tonight. Unfortunately, it's due to the time we can't play that anymore, but it's going to be available later on in the Metaverse, which is actually now working after 2 hours. So thank God for that. So just going forward, that you understand, CleanTech is one part of it. We are going to focus on a lot of other domains that are somehow related and correlated to that.
So Matt, how does someone like me new to knowing you guys, how do we reach out to you?
So very good question. So I would have said in the Metaverse, but now today maybe not. So we do it the old way. So on one hand, we have very old-fashioned website, but we also have a LinkedIn presence where you can follow us on our LinkedIn page, right? Which is very easy. Where we also going to feed a lot of the kind of undertakings and events that we are going to do. But also every one of us that is here, Veronica,
Camilla Field, we have, takeout, garage,
Yeah.
sorry, garage. Take our contacts,
Thank you, David.
reach out to us. It would be awesome if you guys think, hey, you know, what's coming from Switzerland? Money, smart people, good talents, right? Not only cheese and chips, but actually not right. Much more. And there is really a lot coming, and now we have actually this momentum to kind of really revamp that, really bring that in. We have the support of Governor Newsom's office, there's the support from the Swiss State Department and all the related agencies. So it's really exciting time, and I hope we can.
We're also talking about Swiss engineering over here.
Yeah. Swiss engineering. So having said that, we have some Swiss stuff. Well,
But
over there.
for the people online, can we say thanks and let them know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Can you? Guys, I'm thanking you on behalf of the Swiss Chamber of Commerce of Southern California. You guys were awesome. Your talks were really fantastic. I learned a lot. I really appreciate it. I think everybody in the room does as well. Go have some fun. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
So it's kind of almost, what is it, a rule or, yeah, a rule of, I don't know